looking back, like I enjoyed drawing in class in elementary school. We had like a nice art program with a art teacher I really loved, and things like that. But my senior year of high school, I was diagnosed with lymphoma. I
Wow.
did chemotherapy for almost 3 years. My world had shifted. My priorities had just changed. My plan was to become an orthodontist. But then after going through this experience of chemo, and
Mm,
I started doing art classes. And at some point, like in that period, my advisor was like, you get all A's in your art classes and you get all C's in your science class. Like I thought everybody gets A's in art. And so art gave me a voice. And then it also gave me this thing of like, I was searching for a space where my work could persist beyond my body. And so making things gave me this space where I was like, oh, this is how I can contribute to time and to history, beyond just the physical capabilities of my body or of my mortality. I say I'm a conceptual artist, so I really follow the idea and the form comes in after. And I think that started from that core space of what brought me into art in the first place, which was trying to communicate experiences to people or translate them in some way, something bigger than myself. I think it started in a very personal space where it was a vehicle for me to understand myself. Chemo ended up being this awakening for me. Before all of this happened, I was very concerned with keeping up with everyone else, my peers, like chemo forced me out of that timeline and put me just on my own course for things. So it started me there, whereas this very personal space to figure out what had happened to me. And through practicing art, it's given me ways to do that on a bigger, more cultural level, where it's not just a personal thing that I'm translating, but these larger cultural,
mm.
finding ways to communicate them and build conversations around them, I think is the main goal of my work. It's just opening up conversations and seeing where that takes us next. So we're mostly looking at Lincoln, Lee, Jefferson. And with a lot of these early melted forms I was doing, I was melting them in the shape of maps as well. So it's a way to sort of impose that perspective of the way that they melt into our geography. They become part of the space. They're not just this form isolated in their uh, specific location, but they really inform the whole map as it is a sort of chessboard of occupation. That one was like old Virginia, like one of the early like 1700 maps of Virginia. North Carolina, Virginia, they were just like going all the way across the United States when they first decided to start colonizing. Map making, monument making, currency making are all based in the ways that we experience them in colonial practices. So I think it was a way of looking at the contemporary and connecting it to where these things are coming from, where they had homeless, newly free Black people that were living in Richmond, who were living in a freedmen community that was that park before they made it a public park. They evicted everyone, but now we just walk in that park and people just walk their dogs and have soccer practices and don't know why that park is there and why it's a sundown park, but law was made in 1866. So it's connecting our present to the past that created it, I think is a large part of my practice and the research that I'm doing to inform some of these projects. There was never repair for all of these injustices. So I think that's the core of where my research comes into the practice and the way that I'm making these forms is trying to inform that space or that perspective. A monument does a few things in the US. They are permanent in their materials. They're usually monumental in their size, and they're usually singular in their form. Such an untouchable space, and that seemed like such a contradiction or a conundrum that we live in this so-called land of the free, and yet like it is so not free. There is so much that is actually untouchable. So to flip that, I made them malleable and impermanent in their materials. I made them miniature in their size. I made them multiple in their form so that we could all engage with them, and then distributed them, letting them hold space. They can be in personal spaces. This project is related to this larger series I'm working on called the 40 Acres Archive. And the 40 Acres Archive is interested in what I was just saying, looking at the period of Reconstruction, seeing what happened then to this first generation of freedom nationally. So the project has been sort of locating spaces of Black Reconstruction history or early freedmen history, finding these spaces, creating events around telling the histories that are located there, and then connecting them through this larger archival process of, I hadn't actually been to Chimborazo Park, so I started by doing research to figure out what I would want to do there. Pretty quickly, I find that it's a freedmen community. It was a freedmen community, but there's no information about the thousands of Black people that lived at this park for a year before the city evicted them and, made it illegal for anyone to be there, and then turned it into a park. So 40 acres, for those that don't know, 40 acres and a mule is a historic form of reparations that was enacted in the United States. So the project is sort of understanding all of that and telling those stories. So yeah, to interact with this history of Chimborazo Park and the freedmen community that was there, we hired a skywriter to trace the dimensions of a 40-acre plot in the sky above this space. To again call forth that memory of reparations over this space that was supposed to be that thing, and then again it was canceled. So yeah, we had pamphlets that we were giving out to people. My student researcher gave a speech telling the story of this freedmen community before the skywriter then flew over and marked that space for us.